that sunset, guys. Just caught the tail end of this sunset here, just dipping below those houses. The tail end of the sunset, that means the very end. All right, so welcome back to another vocabulary walk video. Actually, today I want to teach you guys some photography vocabulary, or maybe I should say more specifically camera vocabulary. Okay, it's another shot of the sunset. I just actually saw these big houses going up here, guys, and I thought, you know what, we should just go up this path here and just take a look at these. Just look at these massive box houses. I mean, it's just a big box, really. Let's see if we can get a better view from the other side. But you know, that's the kind of architecture, or I should say the lack of architecture, that we have here in Canada. They put up these huge box houses. I mean, they look a bit better from the front, right? As you can see here, you know, these people are really rich that live around here. I mean, not super rich, but I mean, they're definitely well off. You know, like a house like this, you know, it would go for probably 1.5 million right now. So the housing market in Canada right now is crazy. So I'm making this video right now. It's April 1st, April Fool's Day. It's April 1st, 2022. All right. So in the last few years, so remember when Justin Trudeau came into office, you know, a few years ago, like maybe 5 or 6, 7 years ago, I can't even remember when he came into office, but the term came into office means he became prime minister, right? So when Justin Trudeau became prime minister, a house like this would have cost about $400,000. Now it costs over $1 million. This house would easily go for over $1 million. So if you think about that, right, that's insane. That's just since his time in office, houses have doubled in price, well, in value. If you're a homeowner, that's a good thing, right? Because then your house went through the roof, pun intended. If something goes through the roof, it means it goes up really fast, right? So housing prices went through the roof under Trudeau's leadership. Now, if you're a homeowner, that's a good thing. But if you're not a homeowner and you're trying to get into a house, like to buy it, you know, if you even want to buy a small condo these days, like here in this area, Northeast Calgary, and Northeast Calgary isn't even, like, typically Northeast Calgary is considered the cheapest area. I mean, if you go down to the southwest or northwest here in Calgary, man, those houses are easily $1 million. They're like, I don't know, maybe like $1.5 million or something like that. So maybe 2, 3, 5 million. I mean, there's some huge, just some kids coming up this path here on their bikes. Thought I'd get thought it would be kind of quiet at this time. Thought everyone might be eating supper. Guess I was wrong. Everybody's out for an evening stroll. Evening stroll means an evening walk. An evening walk. So I'll give you another shot of the sunset there. Oh, here we go. Clear sailing. Nobody's over here. So let's walk this way. Get another view of these box houses. Clear sailing means just straight ahead. There's nothing bad on the horizon. There's nothing threatening. You know, if you're like on a ship and there's some dark clouds, you know, it's a bit of a dangerous situation. You don't know what kind of storm is going to come, right? But if it's all clear skies, you can say clear sailing. So clear sailing. So guys, look at these box. I mean, could you come up with a less original designed house? It's literally a box, a massive box. Let's take a picture of those massive boxes. All right, look at that. Look at those boxes, guys. So I'll stop rambling about housing, the housing market here in Canada, and I'll start talking about the purpose of this video, which is to teach you camera vocabulary. Now you might be thinking, well, I'm not even interested in cameras. I'm not interested in photography. So why should I learn camera vocabulary? Well, I want to give you a tip on improving your English, okay? This is a good tip. Every year, you're probably learning English for, let me know, how long have you been learning English for? Let me know down in the comments. Is it a year? Is it 5 years, 10 years? Just a few months? Guys, I'm gonna veer off the path to avoid these people coming up. To veer, if you veer off the path, that means you kind of go off. You turn to veer. You veer off the path. And I just want to look at a little bit closer, look at these houses. I wonder if these houses have basements, because they're already 3-story. It's a 3-story house, right? Story means level or floor. This is what's called a walkout basement, okay? It's kind of built on a hill, all right? So on that side, like the street side, it looks like a 2-story house. But from the back, it looks like a 3-story house, right? So the lower level kind of is the basement, but it's called a walkout basement. So actually the basement is on the ground floor at the back of the house, but at the front of the house it is, so it's kind of a basement. It's kind of not a basement. There's another little shot of the sunset going down between those houses. So back to my tip. All right, this is a good tip. If you want to take your English to the next level, you need to learn what I would recommend is take one topic every year and just learn about that. Just kind of take up a hobby, a new hobby, or a new field of interest, right? So even though you might not be interested in photography, it'll really help your vocabulary to learn. And that's what I want to do in this video. I want to teach you some simple words and phrases that you know, maybe you didn't know. Oh no, there's another guy coming up on the path, guys. I'll pretend to be taking a picture here. The sunset. All right, so this lens is a manual focus lens, so it's probably out of focus. I'll talk more about that in a second. All right, so now even native English speakers don't know the vocabulary, you know, when it comes to a subject they don't know very much about. Most native English speakers don't know anything about cameras. They know a few words, but it's not like they're maybe not comfortable with the set of vocabulary that comes along with that field, right? Every field has its own words. Cooking, that's why I started the cooking show. You know, cooking is such a common thing, and there's so many words that are like specific to cooking that that's why I wanted to start the cooking show, to teach you guys all that, because I mean, food is really important part of life. Everybody eats food. Most people know how to cook a little bit, or they do some cooking. So it's a really, like, cooking is much more important than photography or cameras. But it's still, you'd be surprised how many words are related to other things. Okay, so I'm just gonna go up to where these benches are. I see some benches over here, so I can put my GoPro down and operate the camera with 2 hands. All right, so I'll give you one word here. One word that you might think is just a camera word would be the word articulate. Articulating. So look at this screen here. This is the camera screen or display. Call it a screen or a display, but look at this. Okay, I can flip it up like that. It's a selfie screen. I can take selfies of myself, right? So this kind of a screen, a lot of people call it a flippy screen, or maybe a flip up screen. But actually, this screen is another word you can call it is a articulating screen. Okay, so, and in cameras very often they say it's a fully articulating screen. Okay, so that means it can either go up like this. This is up. This articulates up, but a lot of cameras, the screen comes out to the side. Okay, so here are these nice benches. I'm just gonna put down my camera, and it's got to take off the wrist strap. Gotta put out my little tripod. All right, so here we go. I'm just gonna set my camera down on the bench here. So that's the camera strap, so I don't end up dropping the camera. But a lot of camera screens come out to the side, okay, and that's called a fully articulating screen. Now the word articulate, I mean articulating, that might not, you know, it might not be the most common word in English, right? But you'll find this word in other fields as well, right? Articulate. Actually, the word articulate kind of has another meaning. Guys, it's cold out here. I thought it was going to be warm. That's why I came out here to make this video. Now I'm freezing. My hands are freezing. Better put on my gloves. Articulate means to be very precise in your speech. Okay, so if there's a miscommunication, you could say, sorry, I didn't articulate that very well. I need to learn how to articulate things better. That means to be very clear and like precise in your speech. So to articulate something, right? So there's your first camera word. Now let's just go to some basics first, right? This is the camera body, this part of the camera, and this is the lens, okay? So this kind of camera is called an interchangeable lens camera. You know, a lot of cameras you buy, it's just the camera and lens are like one kind of built in together. You can't take off the lens, but with this one, look, how do I take it off? There we go. I took off the lens, and there is the body, and that big thing there is the sensor. Okay, so the sensor of the camera. Now this sensor size is called APS-C. Right, so different cameras have different camera sizes. Like my GoPro here that you're seeing me on, that's got a very small size, a small sensor size. Typically, if you want really good quality pictures, like professionals shoot with cameras that have pretty big sensors. Now this is one of the largest kinds of sensors in cameras. There's the bigger one up from this is called a full frame sensor. Okay, they call it full frame. It's a bit bigger than this, and then there's even one higher than that I've never really seen anybody shooting on a medium format. It's called medium format. Okay, so the different sensor sizes have different names. The one underneath this is called micro four thirds. My Olympus EM10 camera that I usually take on my vocabulary walks, that one is a micro four thirds sensor. So this sensor is a bit bigger than that. And then below micro four thirds is 1 inch, is a 1 inch sensor. It's about that big, right? So camera body, camera lens. Now this lens is a manual, well, it's an all manual lens, okay? So I control the focus manually, and I control the aperture manually. There's a good word to know, aperture. Have you heard that word? So you know what it means? So aperture means the amount of light that is getting into the sensor, right? So I can control that by controlling the aperture, okay? See this back ring here? That controls the aperture. The front ring controls the focus. So look what happens, all right? Look into the lens here. Can you see me? It's big, right? It's a very big opening. That's called a wide aperture. And then if we make it smaller and smaller till it's just like a tiny little tiny little hole for light to get in, right? Now, why would we control the aperture? Like, what's the purpose of that? Well, it's kind of like your eye, right? If you're out in the bright sunlight, you know the little black spot in the middle of your eye? Just burped. Probably too cold. I'll blame my burp on the cold. So that spot in your eye is called the pupil, okay? Your pupil dilates. So in bright light, it gets really small, right? But in the dark, at night, it gets pretty big because it needs to let in more light to see things. So it's the same with the aperture. So that's called aperture. Okay, it's a kind of a specific camera term. Let me put the lens back on. Now guys, this is a new camera. I just bought this camera. It's not new. I actually bought it used. It's a few years old. It's maybe 5 or 6 years old, maybe 10. It's probably almost 10 years old actually. So I just bought it for, guys, I'm struggling to put on the lens. Where is that thing? Is it there? I'm having some issues. I'll find it one of these days. There we go. So I just bought this camera secondhand actually. It was $130. It's a good camera. I mean, cameras like this, they're cheap. If you ever want to get into photography, I would recommend doing this. Buy a really cheap camera like this, maybe like, you know, 5 or 6 years old or something like that. Now this one is called the Sony it's called the Sony NEX5T. Sony NEX, I don't know who names these cameras, NEX5T. So it's about, yeah, I would say maybe around 8 years old or something like that. But still a great camera. And then get yourself a manual lens so you can learn how exposure works. Okay, this lens was about $90. You could probably get it I bought this new. You could probably get it secondhand for like $50 or something like that. So it's a really cheap package like this you could get for, you know, probably under under 200 Canadian dollars. So, but they still take really good pictures. Okay, so enough talking. Let me actually take some pictures so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so it's nothing interesting to take pictures of out here, guys. Let's move here, move some scenery and go to this shrub. All right. So, oh man, guys, I can't do this properly. There, I'll put my camera down there. Okay, now we're gonna try to take a picture of this shrub, this little bush here. And so one of the advantages of a manual focus lens is that you can play around with like the blurry backgrounds, right? Like you know, a lot of people they like to have blurry backgrounds in their pictures, right? So with a lens like this, you can kind of play around with that and get some kind of cool looking shots. Now this is the very first time I'm out here taking pictures with this camera and this lens. I've never done this before. Wish me all the best. Whoops, that was a terrible one. Okay, so I just took a shot. It's a blurry background. Okay, a lot of people like that blurry background. So the larger the sensor, the blurrier the background, and also the wider the aperture can open, the blurrier the background. So you want lenses, ideally lenses with really big hole, like that can open really big to let a lot of light in. But also, not only is it good because it lets a lot of light in, but it blurs the background, right? And also the size of the sensor has to do with that too. So if you have a camera with a big sensor and a wide aperture lens, it's easy to get really blurry backgrounds, and people like that look, right? I love that look. not sure if that was a good shot, but just heard some geese. The geese are returning north, I think, for the spring. Yeah, so in the winter the geese fly south, and then the summer they fly back up here, fly north. So the word shutter is that button right there, like the button that actually takes the picture, right? So look at that. I just press the shutter. Yeah. Okay. So shutter, that's a good one. Now another word that is kind of specific to cameras and photography is the word ISO, or some people say ISO. It's just the letters ISO, right? And that refers to the sensitivity of the sensor. Okay, so there are 3 ways to make your photo brighter. Okay, one of those ways is to make the aperture bigger, to let in more light, right? Another way is you increase the ISO, and you can do that on the camera. Some cameras have a dial on the top that you just, you turn to set the sensitivity. But some cameras it's done you just kind of do it in the camera. It's pretty easy. Or you can just set it to auto ISO. So that means the camera chooses the best kind of the best ISO to use to make it kind of a medium exposure, kind of a medium bright exposure, right? So the word exposure means the brightness of the image. So, if a picture is like all white, then it's like overexposed. And if it's like too dark, then it's underexposed. So typically people want a picture that's like exposed properly. But you know what? Sometimes what you want is sometimes cameras don't really understand what's going on, right? Like, have you ever tried taking your like a picture at night, and it's like the camera takes all the black area and makes it like really bright, and tries to make it brighter, because the camera's too stupid to know that the dark is actually supposed to be dark. It's not supposed to make it brighter. So that's why I would recommend getting a camera that you control that has manual controls, so then you can kind of understand how this works. Because photography is actually a lot of fun if you can if you kind of learn how to do it. Now, I haven't really done much photography in the last few years, but I'm hoping in the future to actually get into it more seriously. Maybe one of these years I can buy a full frame camera, which I would love to do, with a nice telephoto lens. The word telephoto means it can reach really far, so you can zoom in, really far. Like if you're shooting wildlife, like birds, or I don't know, cheetahs, if you're in Africa and you want to shoot some like safari kind of animals, then you need a telephoto lens. Now, if you're inside your house and you want to get as much as you can, then that's called a wide angle lens, right? So the lenses have different words as well. Should we keep walking so you don't see the same boring me and my face? I just put on my camera here and camera strap. Okay. So yeah, so now there's another factor that control. Whoop! I forgot I had my strap. Just about dropped my camera. There's another factor, a third factor that controls the exposure of an image, and that is called shutter speed. Okay, how fast the shutter stays open, right? So let me think of an example. So it, like the word shutter, it like is the thing that comes down over like windows, or like on the outside of a window. On some windows of houses there's like those little doors that you open on the outside of the window. Those are called shutters. Or some shops have shutters, like especially if you go to countries like India, a lot of the shops will have like a metal thing that you pull down. At the end of the day, You want to close your shop, right? And you don't want anybody to steal the stuff in your shop. So you pull down the shutter and then you lock it so nobody can break in there at night. That's called a shutter. Well, in the same way, the camera has a shutter. The camera opens and closes the shutter, and that's called shutter speed. If it only stays open for a really short period of time, then it's not going to let much light in onto the sensor, right? But if it stays open for a long time, that's a lot of light coming into the sensor, right? So that's another thing. It's called shutter speed. And another aspect of shutter speed that's important is to freeze motion. Have you ever seen a picture where someone is jumping and they're like stuck in the air? Or maybe the car is driving past and the car is blurry, or something is blurry in the picture. Well, that's controlled by shutter speed. If you want to freeze action, like a person jumping in the air, and you want to freeze them in the air, then you need a really fast shutter speed, right, to capture that split second. But if you want them to be like blurry, to show motion, then you need a longer shutter speed. You know, sometimes you see pictures of rain and the raindrops are like that long, right? It's all coming down. Well, really, the raindrops aren't that long. Raindrops are just like little drops, right? But what happened was the photographer left the shutter speed, like increased the shutter speed. No, decreased the shutter speed. Yeah, decreased the, well, you know, basically left the shutter open longer, right? So that it captured more of the motion. So that's why some of those pictures, the raindrops, look really long. If you want to freeze the raindrops to make them like perfect little balls of water, then you need a really fast shutter speed. Okay. So those three things are what control the exposure of an image: aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. All right. Look at those birds, guys. See, I can't really take a picture of them. It's going to be blurry because I can't focus with one hand. See, the focus, I need to focus further away, right? Because when I was over at that bench, I was focusing really close to get a blurry background. But anyway, but for learning photography, guys, honestly, I wish I had done this when I was learning photography, because this is confusing. Sometimes you get so overwhelmed, you want to put your camera into auto mode, automatic, and just let the camera make all the decisions. But that's not fun. Really try to learn about cameras and photography, you know. It's a lot of fun if you control everything. Then when you understand it, whoops, just take a picture of nothing. So yeah, when you understand something, you can enjoy it more, right? So that's what I would say. Just get yourself a cheap camera. Fuji cameras are really great because they have dials on the top of the camera. They have the 3 dials that control the exposure. They've got one dial for ISO, another dial for shutter speed, so you can actually see it right there, and then the aperture you control from the lens itself. Like a lot of the Fuji lenses have the aperture control, just like on this lens here, where you can control the aperture. Like I said, this first ring here is the aperture ring. The second ring is the manual focus ring. So it's a lot of fun, guys. All right, what other vocabulary can I teach you? These like this wheel on the back is called a dial. Yeah, it's called a like this thing is called a dial. Okay, this top one. Sometimes cameras have 2 or 3 dials. This is called, you could maybe call this a dial or a wheel. A wheel. Okay, these are buttons. The other ones are, this camera doesn't have very many buttons. Guys, I'm running out of vocabulary. Thought it would be easier to come up with. I thought I'd have too much vocabulary. Now I can't even think of anything. So there's on the bottom there's the tripod screw, the tripod hole where the tripod screw goes in to mount your camera on a tripod. Now some cameras have a flash that pops up, right? The light, like the light that pops up and you can like take pictures at night. This camera doesn't have a flash, but it has an attachment for an external flash. So I could buy another flash and just like put it on there myself. All right, so you know, guys, I've run out of ideas. This is called the battery door. Look at that, there's the door, the battery door. And inside the battery door, very often it's the battery and the memory card. So the SD card, this camera takes SD cards. There are different kinds of memory cards, micro SD, or there are newer ones that are actually bigger cards, but that's not really important. But you know what, when you learn specific vocabulary about a certain thing, whether it be cameras or cars or, you know, computers or anything like that, you're gonna find words that help you understand the rest of English. Because what is English? English is just a whole bunch of like specific situations, specific things, topics, right? And so, you know, instead of just kind of repeating the same stuff all the time, like, hello, how are you? My name is Mark. All that boring stuff, grammar, all of that. You know, take a topic, like any kind of topic. It could be gardening, you know. That would be a great one. Or anything. And you'll be surprised how many words you can borrow, or you can what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, just how many words are shared among the different fields. All right, so now a word like aperture, that it's a very specific camera word, right? A camera vocabulary, but you'll find the word aperture maybe in other fields too. Like, I'm not sure about maybe if you use like a microscope. I'm not sure if scientists, now I don't know anything much about like chemistry. Took a chemistry class in high school and I didn't really like it much. But maybe for chemistry, like a microscope or a telescope, maybe they would use the word aperture as well. But you'll find that even on your smartphone, right? I mean, your smartphone cameras, that's the most common camera people use, right? And so if you're kind of looking at the specs of the camera, your new iPhone or something, you'll see it'll have the camera specifications, right? The word specs is short for specifications. So it'll say, you know, your iPhone camera, maybe usually now these days iPhones have like 3 cameras, right? So each camera will have different specs. Maybe it'll say like, you know, f1.7, something like that. So aperture is measured in f-stops. They're called f-stops. So it'll be like f1.7 or something. This lens here is an f1.7 lens, right? Now, oh, another word I was going to teach you guys is with lenses, there are typically 2 kinds of lenses you can buy. One is a zoom lens, so you can zoom it, you know. Most zoom lenses will go like at least 3 times. So you kind of get maybe a wider angle, and then it'll zoom in, you know, maybe 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times, right? But then there's another kind of lens, which is called a prime lens. So this is a prime lens that I have on here. That means I cannot zoom it, right? This is a 35 millimeter lens. The advantage of prime lenses is that they typically have wider apertures. Okay, so you can open the aperture wider on a prime lens usually than you can on a zoom lens. Because on a zoom lens, most of the lens is like, taken up with those components to try to like zoom it in and stuff like that, right? And so it can't let in as much light as a prime lens, especially a manual focus prime lens, because it doesn't have any motors. Actually, there's no communication between the lens and the camera. So I just control everything manually, right? Most modern cameras, there's communication between the lens and the camera. With this one, there's not. And so that's why the lens can be so small. Okay, like that's a pretty small lens and a pretty small camera, guys. Like most lenses, like an autofocus lens for a system like this is usually a bit bigger. And especially zoom lenses are pretty big as well. Guys, there's my SUV right across the street there. My trusty red SUV. So I'm just going to, let's see, where can I put my camera? I'll put my camera on the hood of my car here. Get my keys. All right. Gonna get my key fob. Well, actually, that's not a fob. That's actually the key. Sometimes like cars these days don't really even have keys. They just have like a fob, something like this with buttons on it. But this one actually has the key. The metal part is the key, right? So I'm just gonna unlock my car here. Come on into the car with me. I'll take you in. Take you in with me. Make sure nobody's gonna run me over. All right, here we go, guys. So, man, it was so cold. I picked the wrong day to come out and do this. So, but anyway, there's no time like the present, right? No time like the present. It means just when you have an idea to do something, just do it now. You know, the perfect moment might not come, so it's better just to do it now, right? So, man, my fingers are freezing off. I thought it was warm out here today, but it's probably like maybe -2 degrees, I'd say, or -3, something like that. So anyway, just gonna fire up my SUV here. To fire up means to start it. So listen to this. I'm gonna fire it up, all right? There it is. Just fired up my SUV. See, and hear that light? This is the tire sensor. So my SUV, it's an old SUV, right? Guys, I'm just trying to touch the back. Okay, there we go. So this light is flashing. That's the tire sensor. It's telling me all kinds of stuff. It always says the tire pressure is wrong. I need an oil change. It's just bad news, right? My SUV, it's an older SUV. I took it on a trip across Canada, so it's had a lot of life already. We'll see, maybe one of these years I'll have to take the plunge and buy a different vehicle. But for now, it's still rolling. As long as it's still rolling, I can keep rolling. All right, so anyway, guys, can you even see me? It's dark in here. There we go, got a light. So anyway, hope some of those words helped you a little bit. Thought I'd be able to come up with more words, but I don't know. Anyway, at least you saw those nice box houses, the giant box houses back there. It's crazy. So if you save up $1 or $2 million, you can move here to Calgary and buy yourself a big box house. But anyway, guys, hope you're staying safe and healthy and happy wherever you are. I love you so much, and as always, I'll see you guys over in the next episode of Mad English TV. Take care.